Recently, I received an email about a Jenkins plugin that I help maintain. And what was interesting was it was from the security team. And since this was one of the first times I've ever had to deal with the security team, at least on a plugin, I figured, well, I probably should get with my co-author about this plugin. And fortunately, the co-author is Mark Waite. Mark, how are you doing?
Fine, Darren.
So we got an issue about a plugin that has a security vulnerability. And we thought it was a good idea to go ahead and sort of record this process of how do we resolve it? What was the process like to even get started? Again, I woke up one morning and I saw an email from a repo that I'd never gotten a message from before. And that was a little disconcerting. Obviously, since you maintain some other plugins, this isn't your first rodeo in doing this. And you looked at it as like, oh, here we go again. Or what was your initial reaction?
Yeah, there's an element of, oh, that's a shame. I thought we were all secure and healthy and fine. And it turns out, no, we're not. The security team disclosed something to us that said, hey, there's this problem in this plugin that you maintain. And then the security team offered us, hey, here are the steps you should take in order to get involved with this. First, please tell us that you're willing to fix it. And then they will create some infrastructure for us. From that infrastructure, then we can begin the fix. And then they tell us about the process, saying things like, hey, please don't disclose the existence of a security vulnerability of any sort, because even the disclosure of the existence of a vulnerability can encourage malicious actors to look more closely at something. Oh, there's a vulnerability. I wonder what it is. So we're intentional, and the security team is careful not to disclose things prematurely. The existence of a vulnerability is already information that we wouldn't want an attacker to have.
And that's why we're not doing this one live. We typically do a lot of live streams. This is one that we're not doing live on purpose because we're going to be fixing the plugin live in this video, but you won't see it until after the disclosures have all gone public, the new version of the plugin's available, and most importantly, the security team has reviewed this video and making sure they're okay with it. So if you're seeing this, all those things have happened.
Right, and that's part of the value and the benefit that we gain from the Jenkins security team. We're grateful for what they do. They remind us that I get to live as a developer mostly in a everybody's my friend's world, whereas the security team knows the reality. They understand that many times the people who would attack our software are not our friends. And so they help us do things safely and sensibly so that we can improve security for all Jenkins users.
So are we ready to get into this?
I think we are, yeah.
Okay. So let me go ahead and get your screen shared.
Okay.
The plugin in question is a very funnily named plugin. The testng-plugin-plugin.
Right. So
it's just what it is.
Well, the original author made a mistake in creating the artifact ID of the plugin. And that mistake, because it's very, very painful to change artifact IDs in repositories. So that mistake comes up and all the time now. We see this. So be careful when you're creating things initially. Like many, many times in computer science, it's a very hard problem to do naming well. In this case, the naming wasn't done as well as we'd like.
Yeah, but that's okay. At least we know what it is.
Right.
So going back to what we said, we received emails. One of the things that we received was a link off to a Jira issue, and we also received a link to a private GitHub repository.
Right. So here's the Jira issue. Okay. And this Jira issue describes the bug report. Hey, the test description is not escaped, and so it can allow a cross-site scripting attack. It talks about the severity. It gives us a nice description textually of what are the issues, points at the locations in the code that may be a problem, and then gives a beautiful stepwise set of instructions that say, do these things in order to see the failure. And having done those things, and then they give a recommendation. Hey, you should really take this step to avoid cross-site scripting vulnerability. And they provide a link to the cross-site scripting defensive measures that can be applied to a Jenkins jelly page, to Jenkins code. And all very helpful things, good things for us to read and be sure that we understand.
And also, this also shows that this is not the first time the Jenkins security team has run into this type of problem, specifically cross-site scripting, because there is a whole set of documents around how to mitigate it.
Correct.
Or options to mitigate, I should say.
Right. And cross-site scripting is quite a common web-based vulnerability. So there are lots of tools that can help with the diagnosis. There are lots of techniques that can help defend against the risk of such a thing. And those tools and those techniques are a great help.
Okay. So you've spent some time looking at it. You have a game plan.
I do. All right.
Of how we're going to remediate this.
We actually, part of the exercise was we discussed the game plan. So the original submission came here in an automated message from the security team saying, hey, Mark, Darren, and Nalan, there is an unresolved and at this point undisclosed security vulnerability in this plugin you maintain. Here are some guidelines. Please read these instructions. So a page that talks about it. And then please coordinate a release with us so that the security team can announce the vulnerability coincident with the time when we release the new version of the plugin with the fix. And sometimes they do that because they would like an opportunity to combine several different announcements into a single larger advisory. So this is the security team coordinating. And so we then responded, hey, thanks. And having read through it, we saw, oh, hey, here's this idea. What we should do is disallow a capability that had been intentionally added to the plugin unless this escape hatch property is set. And we'll do that. That's the idea. And we would do that in two places where the problem exists.
Okay. And then you asked me, what do you think of that? And of course, I just bobbleheaded, yes, that's fine.
Right. And that's exactly. And when the Jenkins security team saw that, yes, we had acknowledged it, they proceeded to create a private repository. And Darren and I are both listed as contributors, as collaborators on this private repository. And here's our private repository. On this repository, you'll find our master branch, and they intentionally create a different branch as the default branch so that they have a place to give us a message, and so that GitHub actions are not executed and all sorts of other things are avoided on this security repository, just to reduce the risk that someone might inadvertently realize, who is unprivileged, that there is a vulnerability in this plugin.
Now, one other thing for people that may be watching this really closely, you'll notice that this repository is not part of the Jenkins CI organization.
That's correct. Jenkins CI Cert is a set of private repositories that GitHub allows us to have as the Jenkins project, and we're very grateful for GitHub doing that. So there is the Jenkins CI repository that's all public. Then there's Jenkins Infra, that is a hybrid of public and private, and Jenkins CI Cert, which I believe is 100% private.
And that's anytime a new repository shows up here, then that's when security is doling it out once a maintainer says, yep, I've got it, no problem.
That's correct.
Okay. So they created an issue. Once we acknowledged it, they created the repository, and then we're here.
Right. And now we're ready to talk about, okay, what do we do with this? And we can look at the description, the details of what we're going to do with it. What we're going to do is and maybe Darren, it's best if I highlight the problem first. Mm-hmm. Let me show the problem, or at least hint at why the problem exists live, if that's okay.
Yeah.
I'm just going to bring up my Jenkins instance, and let's take a look at it, because on this Jenkins instance, we can see the kind of problem. So I've got a repository or a job that I use to maintain testng. And in this repository, we'll see I've got a sample job here. And in this sample jobs configuration, if we look at how it's configured to use testng test results, scrolling downward, here we go. So here it is, testng. This says, look for any file named testng results and summarize the results. Under the advanced button is this set of 4 checkboxes. First checkbox, escape the test description string. So escaping the test description string says, if checked, the plugin will escape the contents of the test description so that anything it contains will not be rendered as HTML.
Right.
If I uncheck this, guess what? Now my test description can inject HTML into the Jenkins page. And it can inject unescaped HTML, which means I've now got a cross-site scripting attack.
Right.
Likewise, this one, escape exception message, is the same story. If I uncheck that box and save the job, now job definition is under the control of users. It's not limited always to just administrators. And so what this has done to an administrator is given permission to a user, to a job defining person, to open up a security hole. And the security team correctly says that's not acceptable. We need to by default be secure and not allow users to be insecure without explicit administrator agreement that they accept the perils of being insecure.
Got it. So what's our next step?
Yeah, so next step is let's take a look at the code that we've got here. So looking back at the example, I need to go back to the configure because we're going to go find the source code. The source code here, it's got to be associated with this escape test description string. Okay. So let's look for that in the source code of the plugin. So here it is in a description file in the documentation. That will need to update as well. Right. Help me remember, Darren, we don't want to forget the documentation.
Right.
And then here it is in the help for it. And now that means we can find the same thing in Java. In Java. Would help if I use the correct Java source file in this file. So here we have in the Java file, so there's probably something in this file about escape. And here it is. Should test description be HTML escaped or not? Okay. Right. Should exception messages be HTML escaped or not? All right. So those are 2 private fields on this class that decide whether or not this thing should be allowed to be escaped.
Okay.
And so what we want to do is we want to
but before we get there, at least the defaults here are good.
They are. That's correct. Right. So the defaults are secure.
Right. It's just that you have an escape hatch easily.
We have an escape hatch that's accessible to users who may not be administrators.
Right.
If you have job definition permission, you have permission to open the escape hatch. And that's too much permission being granted to someone who really may not think about the ramifications of opening up that security hole.
Right. Okay. So at least this part is good. As long as you leave it checked, everything's joy, joy, happy, happy. The problem is when you choose to uncheck it.
Right. As part of the proposal, we took this one and said, let's do, here it is. This one? Nope. Maybe. Oh, yes, here it is. Good. It's this one.
Tap.
So when we had the discussion, we talked about this property is the way that an administrator using a property on the Jenkins controller's command line that starts it could say, I'm willing to allow this. it actually won't change the defaults. It will still by default be secure even with the escape hatch open. But this will allow users to then decide if they want to use that or not.
Or could we say it, this will allow an administrator to give users the ability to do what they can do today.
Correct. Yeah, good way to say it. So today, users have the option to choose to open the risk, and this setting
without the administrator having any choice in the matter.
That's correct. Without any involvement from the administrator, the user gets permission to control this security risk. This now gives control to the administrator and says the administrator simply will not allow anyone to open that escape hatch.
Okay. Right. So how do we go about this? Are we going to hide those two fields? Are we going to, meaning the rendered checkboxes, are we just going to just not even show them unless this flag is set? Or are we going to always show them and they can't make changes? What's the right way to do that?
Yeah, my thought was, and this was just me thinking lazily, was that I'll leave the checkbox visible and let it show current state. And if they uncheck it and this property is not allowed and they save the page, the next time they come back, it will show up as checked again.
It'll just be checked because it basically will ignore that
exactly
state change. Okay.
So now that's the goal, and we should as part of this exercise be sure that the code behaves the way we're setting our goal to be.
Right. So we'll do the first one first and see if it works, and then we'll apply to the same model to the second one.
Right. That was my idea. So what I want to do is I'm going to create a private. And I'm going to use two layers of definition here so that I can make this thing more testable with automation. So we're going to do a private final Boolean that is the allow unescaped HTML. So this is the value. And now I've got to go find the exact syntax. I think it's system.getProperties.
Property, singular.
Get property of that, right?
You'll have to put a string around that. Yep.
Yeah. Now, and there are certainly better ways to do that where I could use a get class, etc. But for right now, let's use this. And for my sanity, it helps me when I put something like this in, if I put some Java doc around it to remind myself. And this is security-2788. Was that the number, Darren?
I think so.
All right. So
I have it in front of me.
Do not allow unescaped HTML in description or exception message.
Well, okay, yeah, that's the overall. Yes,
right. So, and if you and I were to find something that says, "Hey, we need to separate those," we might separate those and split them out.
Yeah.
For right now, I think we're okay with keep them just as a single thing.
Why do you think that?
Just a hunch.
Okay.
So the reason is I can't see why an administrator would want to allow one of them to be escaped and not the other. If you're going to open the door, you probably want to open both doors, not open only one of the two doors.
Would it be better just to name it instead of saying unescaped HTML? Well, no, that's fine.
No, ask your question. Go ahead.
Well, no, I was just thinking if I'm looking at your property name, the property name is fine. Yeah, that's fine. I was making it too complex.
Well, so no, part of it may not be immediately apparent why this sort of two-step dance is happening here, right? So why a Boolean that gets the value of the system property? That is pretty easy. We have to honor what the user passed.
Right.
However, in order to write automated tests, I don't want to have to stop the process, set a different external property and restart it. So I'm cheating and putting something that I can, from inside of a running Java process, I can tweak to override the value of the system property.
Interesting.
Now, I'm intentionally not going to grant access to that thing to anybody. It's it'll be package protected so that other things can't use it to bypass the safeguards.
Right.
But it's that I want to be able to automated test this thing, and therefore I need a way. And so what we'll end up doing, let's just declare them here while we're here. We're going to create a package protected set allow unescaped HTML, takes a Boolean argument, and then we're going to, and so here we'll just say allow equals value.
Right.
And we'll do a getter for it as well. And the formatting in this file, 3-space indentation is almost immoral.
We're not fixing that here.
We are not. That's part of the game here, right? Is we are absolutely not changing that kind of thing. So then we're going to have something that returns a Boolean get allow unescaped HTML, and it will return that value. So now we've got access to something. So the thing that users can control is absolutely final. It reads it once at program startup and will never be adjusted again.
Should that be static too?
Oh, it should be. Oh, yes. Thank you very much. Yes. Thank you. Yes, you're absolutely right. Yes. And we may have to make these others static now that you remind me. We'll have to see. Because
well, I don't think the one you're on right now would need to be. Oh, wait, because we're assigning it to a static at that point. Rats.
Yeah, we'll have to watch the compiler and see. The compiler will guide us on those kind of things. The concept right now is that for testability, I need one of these.
Yep.
I need something I can tweak inside the program.
Yeah.
But I've made the variable, it's the field itself, private, so that it can't be tweaked by anything other than this Java class.
Correct.
And then these methods that access it are package protected. Right. Oh, and I usually like to put in a comment here because it's uncommon to do package protected for testability. So now I've got a setter and a getter that are package protected for testability.
Do you want to leave that double comment on the security line? It's because it's showing. I mean, it doesn't matter to me.
Well, you mean this one here?
On that one, yeah. Did you mean to leave the double asterisk there, or
I do because this one is really a Javadoc comment that will appear in the Javadoc. It would appear in the generated Javadoc if someone ever. And I don't remember if private variables are done, but for me, this is that extra asterisk is a way of saying formal documentation.
Got
whereas
it.
This is just a helper comment.
Right. Okay, good. Okay, so now we've got the boilerplate in place, right? Now we need to go and do the work.
Right. So now there's the piece where we say, okay, how do we safeguard against this thing? And once we've done that safeguarding thing, we should be able to decide, did we get the expected value? Did we get the expected result? So we've got a method here that says set escape test description. Mm-hmm. And here, what I'd say is we just make it like this. So we'll set the value of a test of the local field only if it was passed in as true and allow us unescaped HTML is also true. So this thing is going to be false if either either the argument is false or the default. Now, and we got the right default value, right? Didn't we? Yes. Allow unescaped HTML will default to false. So there's one, and we can do the same thing while we're here with this exception. And now I apologize for not having written any tests yet to prove that this is. I want to try it interactively first.
Okay.
Just because that way we can see, does it behave the way we expected interactively before we spend any energy writing the tests on the few methods we're doing.
All right.
And now one of the fun outcomes of this is if there are automated tests that are doing a good job of testing these two methods, we will fail those tests.
Yep.
So this is a good assessment of how good are our tests.
In other words, if everything passes, the tests aren't very good.
If everything passes, the tests miss this case. That's right.
Yep.
Exactly.
Okay.
So let's compile it and see what we get from it. Now, there could be all sorts of embarrassments and humiliations from this. We're not going to be at all ashamed if it turns out that this doesn't compile at all. Don't be dismayed. That happens.
This is live coding, just not
Absolutely
streaming live. So.
Well, and it's live coding without having an IDE. So oh yes, it would help. Whoops. Oh, right. It's correct. It says we have to declare
you instead of void.
It has to be void. Yes, that's good. Okay.
I saw that earlier and was like, Mark's smarter than me,
type?
so I'll let him get by with it.
Yeah, well, okay. And now there's still another one which says string cannot be converted to Boolean.
Oh, right. That's on the system get properties a string only, so we need to either do a Boolean.value of.
Let's do that.
Which we shouldn't do because
why not?
I can't remember what the if the property doesn't exist, what system get property returns. I don't remember if it's null or an empty string.
Well, isn't there a system.get property that will give us? Let's see if we can find it. Is there a system.get property that will return a default value for Boolean with default?
That's a good question.
Okay, so no, I don't see one immediately. Get system property in Boolean value. Okay. No, that didn't help me.
No. I don't. I think what you're thinking of is there's some helper methods and other packages.
Yeah, see, I'm used to get property, and I thought it would take that there was a way to do a get property. Maybe what we do is we look at Java system.get property Java doc, because I think going to the Java doc may be best for us. And let's try. We'll go to 7 for now and switch to 8. Okay, so here we've got get property. There we go. String. Oh, no, and no matter what, it's string and a default value. So I think we're stuck then. We've got to do just Boolean.
No. Wait. So go click into that one because I'm trying to specify key. If there's no current set, a system set default value. Okay, so that's fine. So go ahead and give it a string value of true.
Yeah,
and then it'll still be in Boolean value of, and that's fine.
Yeah, so I think we want actually a string value of false. We don't want to allow.
Oh, right.
Right.
Yeah,
then we do
direction.
a Boolean value of, and that says okay, absolutely. If it's not set, we want it to be false.
Yep.
And now let's try that compile again.
Hey, there's the tests.
So it's running tests. That's good. Now this will give us the nerve-wracking experience. I happen to know what's going to happen already here. It's going to fail one or more tests.
Okay. Well,
that's a relief,
good.
Right? Guess what? We've got a test that's trying to test settings, right. And it was expecting a true on something and instead got a false.
Right. So it's 77 in that class.
Yeah, test. Well, and I'm going to propose for now we're going to ignore the test because I want to do an interactive exploration first.
Sure.
And so for this, I need to do a pkill. Let's see. I've got a Docker process running that I need to kill first. So Docker kill this. Okay. And is my compilation finished? Not yet. Okay, good. Yes. So it's finished. Now let's do a Maven compile. And instead of doing verify, we're going to do HPI:run. And now because I'm running this development environment on a Linux box that's remote to me, I've got to do a tunneling really quickly. So we're going to borrow a tunnel here to this. And if we're lucky, my web browser now there we go. Okay, so I should have a tunnel running now, and let's bring in a web browser and see how it looks. Okay, so here's my Jenkins. Now it should have, if we look at manage plugins, it should show that testng is installed here, and it will be a version number with snapshot. Yep, there it is.
Good. All right.
So now let's create a new item, and testng a freestyle project, and then here we're going to add a post-build action, which is publish the testng results. The default's good there, and we're going to attempt to uncheck both those, save it. Now if we configure again, our hope for is that it will have ignored that value. Nope.
No, it didn't.
Okay, so now so we may have to do some more checking to see why it didn't do that. I thought it would. Okay, let's see. So there's probably something we could do with GroovyScript here that would let us inspect it, or let's just go stare at the code and see what mistake I made. Just a moment.
Okay.
So where's my mistake? Okay, so, and I've got to shrink. I'm going to shrink the text in this window just a little, Darren, so I can read it. Okay, so.
That's fine.
All right, so we've got allow unescaped HTML, which should
be
set it to false, so it's not allowing it. And then it says set, we're never calling the setter or the getter.
No.
So, and here it says, if you attempt to set it, and false will always be false. Huh, interesting. Okay.
So false and false.
True and false both will result in false. So this should have not set it. Let's take another step. Let's look at something in a little different way, see if it's a UI problem or a logic problem, because it could well be that what we've got here is purely a UI problem. Now, where did there we go. This one, nope, not that one.
Not that one, the one.
Here, we'll just go this way. Localhost 8080/Jenkins. Okay, so configure. Okay, it shows unset. So when I save this job, it's going to write it onto that computer in the work directory of this thing. And now there will be in the jobs testng config.xml. And let's see what escape says. Okay, escape false. Here says false.
That's the problem.
Oh, no, wait a second.
So if it's false and false, we actually need that to be true.
Do I have backwards logic here?
I think we did it backwards. I think so. All right, let's go back up top in your top section or wherever.
Yeah, so I
can't tell where your splits are. Okay.
Yeah, so here's the code. Let's quit out of ediff. We'll get right back to the code. Okay, so here's the code. All right, so Boolean logic.
Right. So should we be inlining that or should we wrap the setter with if allow unescaped HTML?
So I'm not. Are you thinking call the getter here? No, I'm not sure I understand your question.
So yeah, that's what I'm saying is should we call the getter and wrap? So if allow unescaped HTML, then we would do this. I mean, in line it should be fine, but since we're defaulting allow to false, and since we unchecked it, false and false is always going to be false, which is not what we want.
So I think, okay, so let's maybe I'm just trying to be too sneaky here. Let's try. I think what you're saying is
that, yeah.
Only if
that's yes.
Otherwise,
nothing.
Well, otherwise I would say set it to, if you call it, we're going to set it to false. We're going to set it to false. We're not going to allow.
No, we're going to set it to true. We want to keep it true.
Oh, right. You're right. The problem is that. I see your point. Absolutely. It is that we've got an else here.
Yeah, something like that.
Right, that says, hey, if you're not.
Yeah, we have to if else it, because if the flag isn't set, so we're forcing the flag set to false by default. Right? So that is going to fall on the outside. But if somebody goes and sets the flag to true, then we want to allow them to set it to whatever they chose. I think this is the right way to do it.
This is certainly the most understandable way to express it, right?
Yeah,
so let's do that. And let's admit that we're going to enjoy trying to make the code understandable.
Are you wanting elegant instead of understandable? Is that what you're trying to do?
I was trying to use a simple conditional, but thankfully there's a reason why we pair up on these kind of things, because my simple thing didn't work. Didn't work the way it was supposed to anyway. And this should be escape the test description we want to be true, right?
Yep, because if that dash D has not been set, I don't care what they're doing with the checkbox, it's going to be true.
Exactly. We will always escape the test description unless they set the system level property to avoid it.
Yeah, and for me, I understand we're trying to be easy on us, but from a user experience, it's sort of stinky. Because I as a user, I've always been able to do this. Now the plugin gets upgraded, and what do you mean? I'm unchecking the box and clicking save, and it's still being checked.
Right. Well, and that may argue that we ought to put something in the online help for it that says, look, this will not be honored unless the system property has been set. So that's a good thing. We should do that along with, that's another piece of the documentation, right? So I'd say let's go back and look at try our experiment again.
Yep. Yeah, I think this is the more maintainable solution. Hopefully we don't have to maintain it again.
I think you've got a great point. Let's take advantage of that. So let's go here.
Nope.
Here we go. This one. Okay.
Yes.
All right. So if we refresh that, and if it's up, okay. Now when we do a configure, and the job configuration as read from the disk was false. So this may show false, right? And now the question is, well, that's a different question. So I'm going to check this one. I'm going to check one of the two, save it. And now when we configure, I would expect both of them to be set.
Correct. Which they are.
Okay. Now, however, this highlights one other problem or one other complexity. Imagine that the user already has a job definition written to their disk. And
the override. Well, okay, so if the config has already been written to disk and the job is not being modified, in other words, they're not going to click on configure, nothing's going to happen to that config XML.
Right. And so when Jenkins serializes the XML and turns it into this object, we're going to be in here with the setting for escape exception message being whatever was in that config XML, potentially false.
Correct.
So this one probably needs, what would it need? This may need either something on read resolve, or we got to think a little more about how to do that.
I think we have to do it on read, because if that flag has not been set, I mean, the worst thing that's going to happen is somebody's going to get frustrated for one time, and then they'll have to go through and do the things.
Right.
But do we want to be overly cautious as a maintainer?
Right. And I think you've got a good question there. So, I think, okay, without doing anything with read resolve, the only way to get access to these fields is through the getters.
Correct.
So they're not available. So we could
do the same route.
Additional conditional here on the getter.
Yeah, let's do that.
Because here we say, hey, if we're allowing it, we'll give you back the actual value.
Correct.
Otherwise, we're going to give you back true.
Correct. Just return true. Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay,
I mean,
so that
as a maintainer, we're being harsh, but that's okay.
Right, and that's not uncommon in the world of security fixes. Security fixes can be quite
breaking,
blunt, right? Yeah. And sometimes they have to, because if you depended on a security hole, we're closing the security hole. Therefore, and there are plenty of ways that people inadvertently depend on security holes.
I think this is reasonable.
Yeah, well, and the nicety is we didn't have to do anything with read resolve, so. Yeah. That for me is I like that a lot. So
even if we did read resolve, we would want this is after read resolve,
right?
In the process. So we want to be as late binding on this as possible.
And you're exactly right. That's the benefit we get here, is that we are doing this absolutely as late as we can, assuring that if allow unescaped HTML is not set. Yeah. We are going to tell the caller consistently, you must escape the exception message. You must escape the test description.
So basically we're doing late binding as possible on the gets and as early binding as possible on the sets.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
Okay, so let's go back to do our experiment again, and this time I'm going to go meddle with that config.xml file, because I want to be sure. Let's revert that buffer in case it's been changed. It has. Okay, yes, so I'm going to subvert it by making both of them false again. So correct. This is now.
Wait, there.
This is now what the user had before this security release.
Yep.
Okay, and now let's restart the process. And up comes my browser. And we got to wait for just a moment while it gets restarted. Okay.
Okay, so we're there.
There. All right, so now
if we go there.
Okay, so here's the project. I hit configure. We're expecting that the advanced will show that the box is unchecked. No, and it's checked.
No, it should not be. It should not be unchecked.
Yeah, I thought that I had.
No, because you've already changed the getters.
Oh, you're right. You're right. So the fact that I set it false.
Now go take a look at the config XML right now.
Okay,
based on the visual, we expect to see true. But in reality,
but based on the actual file contents, we fully expect to see still false because it hasn't rewritten to the disk yet.
Right, and go ahead and flush the buffer. So it's still false.
Yep. It is still false. Okay, so now back to our web browser. So I just unset the exception message.
Okay. Right. Yep. So if you do
save
that.
Now when I do a configure and go back to advanced.
They're both checked.
It ignored my attempt, so I can uncheck these both and save them.
Yep.
And when I go back to configure, it's still going to show them as
checked. And if we go take a look at the XML,
it should show us
both
that it's
should be
now
true.
changed. So let's revert that buffer. Yep, there we go.
Okay. So that seems like a reasonable sledgehammer, I think.
I think so. I think that we've got changes here. Let's look at them again just to see. So what I see is we added our top level thing that is exactly the property value, then our thing that we can tweak with automated tests, and the automated test setter and getter.
Right.
And then now the getter on the actual field that has the problem, we've safeguarded it. Hey, unless you're allowing unescaped HTML, we're always going to say true.
Right.
The setter, same pattern. The getter for the exception message, same pattern. And for the setter. Now, I think we've got it. Now we have to look at the... Now it will need some time to work on fix the automated tests and write more automated tests to cover the cases that we've added to this.
So the one thing we haven't done yet, just for interactive, is can we set a -D with HPI run? I haven't tried that before.
Oh, yeah. Why not? Oh, that's a very good idea.
That should be legal to do, right?
I don't know if it works or not. I've never tried it, but let's try it because I think that's a cool idea. Why not try that same exact command like this, right?
That should work.
Equals true. So -D like that, right?
I think that's right.
Yeah, well, and if not, we'll learn pretty quickly.
Yeah. Okay.
The nice thing about short experiments is we learn very quickly if we're wrong.
Should we put in a warning log item?
Also a good suggestion, right? Because if someone has chosen, that's a good one. I'm going to just make a comment here in that we really do owe the user a warning. We should log a warning if they set it to true. Log a warning.
Would you do that? How would we do that?
Well, what I've usually done is define a system logger, define a logger for this class, and then just log the message.
All right. Okay, so it looks like we're up and running.
Yeah, so let's go back to our web page and see what we see. So,
okay, before we do that, let's go and take a look at our XML.
Oh yes, okay, good.
Let's figure out where the file thinks it is, or where the file truly is to begin with.
So where is my config file? Here it is. Okay, whoops. Would help if I didn't fat finger. Okay, so revert. Okay, so it says escape is true for both.
Both. Okay. So
now,
let's go
if
in.
we got it right here, we can go in here and configure this and make
just one of them.
One of them. So hey, last time we did that one. We're going to do the top one this time.
Yep.
Test description will be not escaped.
Okay.
Okay, now when we hit configure, did it honor it? It did. Now let's go read the config file just to be sure.
Yeah.
And it honored
That's true. Yep. Okay, good. So we've interactively done us being mean.
Mm-hmm.
We've interactively done us with the hatch to take it back to previously bad state. I mean, it's what it is, really.
Right.
Where do we go from here? I mean, this would be back to where now we need to go and write our tests and do more stuff. But from a resolution standpoint, this is the process we've followed.
Exactly.
We got a notification from security.
Mm-hmm.
We acknowledged it within Jira.
Right.
They gave us a repository, and right now, are you working on the master branch? I didn't even pay attention.
So yeah, good question. And one of the safety things that I use, following the pattern that the security team uses, is I never perform a security fix in a directory that has access to anything except the security repository. So when I do a git remote minus v, this is an entirely different directory than I use for any other work, and it has exactly one remote defined. I don't want the risk that I inadvertently push a security sensitive item to the public repository, right?
Right. Yeah. So
I don't want any chance that I'm going to expose publicly that change.
And that's a good process to follow anyway, is if you're working on, if it's your repositories or your organization, that's up to you. But like when I do work with forks, I don't do forks underneath my GitHub directory. I have a GitHub forks directory that all my forks go into, just so I know where it goes. So it's the same basic concept.
Right,
Except
exactly.
Since this truly is a different organization, it's following the same model. You're not mapping the names of your directories to the organization.
So, that's correct. Yeah, but that is exactly it. So I think what we need is a branch.
We should do a branch, right? There's no reason to, because we would do a branch and put in a pull request against the main or master branch in this case.
Right, exactly.
Double check that number.
Oh, sure. Good idea.
We've been saying 2788, and now I'm just like,
yeah. So let's double check. It should 2788.
Okay, good.
All right. So here we go on our double check. So okay, so here's a branch name. And now git status should show we've got one file modified.
Yeah. So the other files we need to modify are the help files.
Right.
For those two fields. We also need to modify the README.
Yeah, actually, let's do.
Do you want to do at least one of them, just so we can capture that?
Let's do the README while we're here. Absolutely, because we owe it to ourselves to show that we should do documentation. Okay, so let's look at what the plugins documentation looks like now on the plugins site, so we get a sense of where it might belong. So testng. Okay, so this is how it looks now. Usage pipeline. Okay, so it looks to me like we need what do you think? A top level description for properties?
I think that's a good idea.
And maybe I don't think we want to highlight the property. Escape hatches should be used rarely and by people who are very serious. So I'd propose we put it at the very bottom.
Yep.
And let's say call it system properties or some such thing. So okay, system properties.
Well, there is another. What is it's manage and system read? How that was in? Is that in core? I can't remember where that is.
It is. Yeah. So there's definitely a concept of
I'm just trying to find a place to where it's already being done to where we could lift. Or do you have any in the Git plugin?
Well, there's this concept of Jenkins features controlled with system properties. That's really a good one for us to pattern by.
Okay.
I like what they do here because this is how core does it, right? So it says they give since such and such a time, the default value is false, description, and maybe we just follow this pattern, at least with our information content, and say, hey, this is what we're going to do.
Yeah, I'm just trying to go back to when those two new properties, system read and manage, were added into core. How that was documented. But that's in core. I'm trying to think, do you have any system properties in one of your Git plugins?
I do, and well, let's
Are they documented?
They are documented, and there's enough shame hiding in there to talk about why properties. So here we have properties, and here's how the Git plugin does it. It just calls it properties.
Okay.
And the technique it's using, it says, hey, if you must set this terrible thing, here, I need to make this text readable. Good.
Okay.
All right. So here it's saying there's a property for default timeout.
Right.
There's a property to disable command line get, a property to, and this one is actually, you and I, yes, this one's allow local checkout, which was a recent security advisory for the Get plugin.
Right.
So this is exactly, and that advisory's been published. So this is exactly the kind of circumstance we have.
Let's use this pattern then. Let's just take properties.
Okay, so we're just going to say, all right, let's do that. So we're going to say properties rather than system properties.
Yeah.
And some explanatory tests, some test ng plugin properties can only be controlled by, now I got to get the words that I used there. So
copy paste is your friend.
Right, exactly. From command line properties set at Jenkins startup.
Yep.
Okay, so here we go. Okay.
That looks
all right. So
good.
Now we talk about what those are, and one of them is
escaping HTML, I guess, because that's what we've named this property.
Yeah, escape. Or how about allow unescaped HTML. All right, and so the test ng plugin, the plugin allows reads user provided test descriptions and test exceptions and shows those strings to the user. Unfortunately, if those strings, or no, let's not say unfortunately, if those strings contain HTML, the HTML is processed by the browser. Unescaped HTML leads to cross-site scripting vulnerabilities. Do not allow unescaped HTML unless you trust every test description and every exception message from every test you'll ever run, that will ever be run.
I'm trying not to snicker now.
Right. And in what conditions would I ever allow that? Yeah, I hope never. So now we need to describe the variable, because that was the piece that...
Correct.
How did it do it? It lists it as a separate property name equals true. Okay.
And it also called out the security issue too. Was that clickable by normal people?
It is.
No?
Yes, it is. Very good. So, and we don't know. Oh, we do know what.
Oh, it goes to the
security issue
advisory. So we could go ahead and rough it in. We could rough it in, and we can always go back, because this is
right.
the
We
reading.
can. We don't know what that security advisor will be, but we can certainly put in the ticket number, the security
Correct.
ID.
So the 20, yeah.
All right. So actually, back to your advice, Darren. Let's just go steal that text.
Yeah.
Okay. There was an introductory sentence, and then we'll just grab this
take
whole
it all,
text for now, and then we can go edit it later.
Yeah.
Okay.
And put that, I guess, below what you've already written.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see. So it was 2, and the number was 2788.
788.
Okay. And we'll want this to be a hyperlink.
Yep. At some point.
Yeah. Yep. Insert advisory hyperlink here, right? Notes that unescaped.
Go copy that from the ticket.
Yeah, there we go. That's a very good idea. So let's go grab that.
No need to reinvent the wheel on this one.
Right.
Well, they already wrote it.
It's been considered very carefully by the security team how to describe it, right?
Yep. So,
okay. So let's go back here. All right. So fetching from a local URL or a path creates a... Okay. So that's not it. Notes that...
Yes.
Test description and test exception
were not escaped, allowing for XSS.
Messages allow unescaped HTML.
Yep. Leading to
a cross-site scripting vulnerability, right?
Correct. Yep. Close enough.
Okay.
And now you can...
Now we don't need that. So current releases of the TestNG plugin disallow always escape.
Yep. Yes. And yep.
Okay, so if test description or test exception messages must not be escaped,
Yep.
and administrators accept the risk
Yes.
of disabling the security safeguard, the Java property, okay.
Is now we'll go grab that.
Let's see, set the Java property, and now we need...
Whatever it was.
Right, and this is... It's in the source code, so let's just go grab it from the source code. This thing right here.
Yes.
Okay, and this is where we like to have that be rendered as...
Yeah.
All right.
Close enough for now. Right. We need to polish it a little bit. We still need to go back and tweak out the help,
Right.
but I think this is pretty close, right?
I think so. Well, and I'm not sure that we even need this because the earlier text does a pretty good job of describing why you would not want to do it. It's
Okay.
a cross-site scripting vulnerability.
Okay. That's good. That's fine. So if you want to whack that stuff at the end, instead of laying out a story about it, just
Right.
just be blunt. And it's
Exactly.
like, you shouldn't do this anymore. So obviously we're not finishing up and doing the whole wrapping it up, but this was the hard part, I think.
Right.
Everything
yeah,
else is just writing
We've got a
docs.
description, and now there is... So let's put a reminder here
Okay.
to do, right? Things we've still got to do are... We need to do update the HTML, update the online help for the fields
Yep.
to note that they are ignored unless they are ignored for the security vulnerability.
Let me ask a question. To make, so instead of just splatting it in, and this is me having never played with this before, could we have it render based on, could we have the help system render a different help file based on the setting of that startup parameter?
Yes, yeah, help can be conditional. Yeah, it's possible to do conditionals inside the help with let's see if I remember right. Well, let's see. I have to think about that.
I mean, it'd be some work, but it can be done. That's
It absolutely can. For instance, if we were to do in fact, I know of places where it exists already in Jenkins that there's conditional help. I
so
just
maybe,
have to go look to see how to do it.
So maybe in this case, we could add that in to only render the "you shouldn't be doing this" message in the case that it's set to true.
Right. That's an
That way it's not
interesting
noisy,
idea.
right? That way you're if they set it to what is the thing? If it comes in default, then the message is just going to be the message, right? And of course, actually, it would be we need to tell it the opposite way, because if this flag because we've coded the fix in such a way that it's always going to set those escape flags. Mm-hmm. It's always going to be escaping everything, or unescaping, whichever way you want to say it. So you would almost have to tell the help the opposite way. Because if they were expecting it, it's like, why isn't this working? Why isn't this working?
Right. Well, wouldn't it be that we want a message that says in the standard mode that they'll get by default when they upgrade to this version, it says we're intentionally ignoring your value here.
Something like that. Yeah.
And then if it's enabled, we probably want an even more bold thing that says this is a security risk if you uncheck this checkbox.
So actually what you just said there, the existing state of help should not be used, and we shouldn't just splat in order to make it a better user experience. We need to have 2 new messages now based on the state of that flag.
Right. That would be right. One way to do it is if the flag is this way, then if the flag is set to disallow unescaped help, show this message. If it's allowed, show a different message. Yeah, exactly.
Again, we're over-engineering it, but I think that would be just a better user experience.
Right. So consider conditional help.
Yeah.
And well, I mean, okay, we could go even one step further and take away the setting completely.
Right. Which we talked about.
We could, for instance, from the jelly form, remove that conditional entirely. I'd have to look to see if it can be done, but because then the property's not even there unless you do allow unescaped HTML equals true.
Correct. Which was, to me, that's the best user experience possible. If I can't do something with it,
right, then don't show it to me.
Don't show it at all. Yeah.
Right. So good. So remove the checkboxes from the UI unless the escape hatch is open.
Yeah, and we needed to test it the way that we just did it to make sure that no matter how we did the switches, things worked as expected. Right. So if we would have started with what I wanted to begin with, we wouldn't have seen the fields, and we couldn't have verified, and there still could have been a hole underneath there.
Right. Good. So we did an interactive check with the problem available and tweaking but then if we can find a way to only show the checkboxes if the global field is set to true, if the global property is set to true, why not? Yeah, that's a good idea.
And then there's no question, in theory, even if they were able to bypass the hiding of those 2 fields, we're still covering it. So this is being aggressive in, what's the word I'm looking for? Coverage isn't the word I'm looking for, but it's in how we're solving for this. We're not just taking the first layer. It's like, we'll just hide it. Well, just because you hide something doesn't mean people can't access it.
Right. Exactly. This is, well, and we've done that with the getter. We've done that with the setters. Right. Yep. So it's hey,
we're just layering on.
In every aspect. And you're right from the user experience, hiding those checkboxes completely. If you can't change them, why show them to the user, right? It doesn't help the user to be shown something that they're not allowed to modify. And even worse, we accept the change and then ignore it.
Right. Okay.
Good.
So
thanks.
Is this pretty much it, do you think?
This is it, Darren. Thanks for your patience. Thanks very much for a fun experience.
Well, okay, fun experience may be a little too strong of a phrase, but
oh no, come on. This was good stuff. I enjoyed this.
And this is just another one of the videos in the series of Jenkins plugin developers, or whatever we name the series. I don't remember anymore. And This one was a little bit different because obviously we didn't do this one live. Couldn't because this result. And again, if you're seeing this, you know exactly the process that we went through to figure these things out. And you know what? If you're still watching and you haven't subscribed here yet, go ahead and click on the subscribe button, give us a thumbs up. And we have videos coming out all the time about all sorts of different things Jenkins. So thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you later.